A man shoves a loaded gun barrel against a little girl's temple, and the only thing standing between her and a bullet is her father, barehanded, bleeding, refusing to kneel. That's where this story ends up, but it starts with a simple drive home through the rain. Ethan Calloway never wanted to be a hero. He just wanted to get his daughter home, safe. What he didn't know was that the woman collapsed in the middle of the road, the one screaming, "Spare me, please!" was about to flip his entire world upside down. And the twist? She wasn't the victim everyone thought she was. Drop your city in the comments. Let me know where you're watching from, so I can see how far this story travels. And if you're new here, hit that subscribe button. You're going to want to be here for what comes next. The gun came out of nowhere. 1 second, Ethan Calloway was watching the road. The next, a man in a black suit stepped out from behind a parked car, raised his arm, and fired 2 shots into the night air. Not at anyone, just up into the rain, like a signal, like a warning. Ethan hit the brake so hard, his daughter flew forward against her seatbelt. "Daddy!" I got you. Stay down, Zoe, stay down." He didn't yell it. He said it the way men say things when they mean every single syllable, when there's no room for negotiation. The way he used to say it to privates in Fallujah, when incoming rounds started dropping too close for comfort. His hands were already moving before his brain fully processed what he was seeing. A woman was in the road, not standing, not walking, crawling, on her hands and knees across the wet asphalt in the middle of Vine City, at 11:40 on a Thursday night in the pouring rain. Her clothes were torn, her left arm dragged at a wrong angle. Blood ran down the side of her face in a thin, dark line that the rain kept trying to wash away and couldn't quite manage. She lifted her head toward his headlights, squinting against the brightness, and her mouth opened. "Please." Just that one word. But Ethan heard it the way you hear a smoke alarm in a sleeping house. It reached something deeper than his ears. He was out of the truck before he made a conscious decision to move. "Lock the door," he told Zoe. "Don't open it for anybody but me. Anybody, you hear me?" "Daddy, who is that lady?" "Lock the door." He heard the click behind him as he crossed the front of the truck, rain hammering his shoulders, moving fast toward the woman on the ground. The man who'd fired the shots was already walking toward her from the opposite direction. Calm, deliberate, no hurry. The way men walk when they know the outcome of a situation is already decided. Ethan got there first. He dropped to one knee beside her, put a hand on her back. Up close, the damage was worse. Her lip was split. Her eye was swelling shut, and her right leg, the one she wasn't using to crawl, was encased in a custom carbon fiber brace from ankle to knee that had been cracked halfway through, like someone had kicked it with serious intent. "Hey," Ethan said. "Hey, look at me. You with me?" Her eyes found his. They were brown, sharp, and terrified. But not panicked. He'd seen panic before. This wasn't panic. This was someone who had been afraid for a long time and had made a decision somewhere deep inside to not let it win. "They're going to kill me," she said. "Who is?" "Him." Her eyes cut sideways to the man in the suit, now about 30 feet out and closing. "Please, please, I have money. I'll give you anything. Just don't let them—" "I don't want your money." Ethan stood up and put himself between her and the man approaching. "That's far enough." The man stopped. He was maybe 40, with a jawline that looked like it had been carved out of something expensive, wearing a suit that cost more than Ethan made in a month. He didn't look like muscle. He looked like management. "Sir," the man said, lifting both hands slowly, "I apologize for the disturbance. This woman is a patient. She has a serious psychiatric condition, and she's been missing from a private care facility since this afternoon. We're just trying to get her back safely." His voice was smooth, rehearsed. Ethan had heard smoother. "That right?" "Yes, sir. I understand how this looks. But she can be dangerous. She's hurt herself before." The man took a step forward. "If you'll just step aside, we'll—" "She's got a split lip and a busted eye," Ethan said. "Psychiatric patients don't usually come out of care facilities looking like that." The man's composure flickered. Just a fraction. Just enough. "She fell," he said. "He hit me." The woman's voice came from behind Ethan's knees, low and burning with conviction. "His name is Derek Holt. He works for my fiancé. Marcus sent him. They've been following me for 3 hours." "She's confused," Derek said quickly. "My name is Victoria Sterling." The woman was pulling herself upright against the bumper of Ethan's truck, using her one good arm to haul herself up off the asphalt. "I am the Chief Executive Officer of Sterling Tech. My company went public on the NASDAQ 4 years ago at a valuation of $6.2 billion. I graduated summa cum laude from MIT. I have a photographic memory. I am not confused." The rain was really coming down now. Derek's hand moved. Not toward her, toward his jacket. Ethan moved faster. He closed the distance in 2 steps, caught Derek's wrist before the hand got where it was going, twisted hard, and drove his elbow into the man's ribs in one continuous motion. The sound it made was not pleasant. Derek's knees buckled. Ethan took the gun, a compact Glock, suppressor already attached, stepped back, ejected the magazine, cleared the chamber, and tossed the pieces in opposite directions across the wet street. The whole thing took about 4 seconds. Derek was on one knee, gasping. "There's 2 more," Victoria said behind him. "Black SUV, end of the block. They've been waiting." Ethan looked up. Sure enough, headlights blinked on at the far end of the street. "Can you walk?" "Not well." "Can you make it to my truck?" "I can try." "Don't try. Do it." He moved back to her, got his shoulder under her good arm, and started moving. "Keep your weight on me." "Your daughter is going to be fine. Move." He got Victoria to the passenger side, yanked the door open, and helped her up into the seat. She bit down hard on whatever sound wanted to come out when her bad legs swung up into the cab. Not a whimper. A controlled exhale through her nose. Ethan noticed that. He went around, got in, found Zoe in the back seat pressed against the door, with both hands folded in her lap and her eyes about twice their normal size. "Daddy, is she hurt?" "She'll be okay." He started the truck. "You all right, baby?" "I'm okay." A pause. "Her face looks bad." "I know." The SUV at the end of the block started moving. Ethan put the truck in reverse, backed up fast, spun the wheel, and came out of it heading the other direction. Not running exactly, just not staying. He drove for 20 minutes without a destination, checking the mirrors every 30 seconds. Victoria sat with her head leaned back against the headrest, breathing carefully, not speaking. Zoe watched her from the back seat with the pure, uncomplicated concern that 7-year-olds are capable of when they haven't learned yet to be guarded about it. "Does it hurt?" Zoe asked. Victoria opened her eyes and looked in the visor mirror at the small face watching her. Something moved across her expression. Not pity for herself, something more like surprise. "Yeah," she said. "It does." "My daddy has a scar on his shoulder from when he was in the Marines," Zoe offered. "He says it only hurt for a little while." "He sounds tough." "He is, but he cries it up." "Zoe," Ethan's voice was mild. "It's true." Victoria Sterling, CEO of a $6 billion tech company, who had spent 3 hours running through back alleys on a broken leg brace while men hired by her fiancé hunted her through the streets of Atlanta, made a sound that was not quite a laugh and not quite a sob, and was somehow both at once. She pressed the back of her hand to her mouth for a second, then lowered it. "He sounds human," she said. "Yeah," Zoe agreed, satisfied. "He is." Ethan made a decision around midnight. He wasn't taking her to a hospital. She told him, in clipped, efficient sentences while he drove, the way someone talks who has processed a nightmare and is now in pure operational mode, that Marcus Chen would have people watching every emergency room in the city within the hour. Her fiancé was methodical, thorough. He hadn't built a position on Sterling Tech's board through carelessness. He wasn't calling the police. That one was harder for Ethan to accept, but she walked him through it in the same flat, factual voice. Marcus had spent 2 years cultivating relationships with 3 senior APD officials. Not enough to own the whole department, just enough to make sure any report filed under her name tonight would be buried or redirected before morning. "You have evidence of this?" he'd asked. "I have evidence of everything," she said. "That's why they want me dead before Monday." "What's Monday?" "Quarterly board meeting. If I walk in there alive and present what I have, Marcus and 4 board members face federal wire fraud charges and lose every share they've been accumulating. If I don't walk in," she paused, "Marcus becomes acting CEO under an emergency provisions clause in the bylaws. It was written in 3 years ago. I didn't read the amendment carefully enough. My attorney flagged it 8 months later, and by then, he'd already built the position." "Yes." Ethan had been quiet for a moment. Then, "How long have you been engaged to him?" 4 years. No more words for a while after that. He took her to his house. It wasn't much. A rental in a quiet pocket of the West Side. 3 bedrooms, a yard that needed work, a kitchen that smelled like whatever Zoe had convinced him to make for dinner, which that night had been grilled cheese and tomato soup, because it was raining, and she always wanted soup when it rained. He carried Victoria up the 2 porch steps because the brace made them impossible, and she didn't argue, which told him how much pain she was actually in. He set her on the couch, got the first aid kit from under the bathroom sink. Zoe, who should have been in bed 2 hours ago, appeared in the hallway in her pajamas with a throw blanket. "Here," she said, holding it out to Victoria with both hands. "You look cold." Victoria looked at the blanket, looked at the small, serious face offering it. She took it with her good hand and said, very quietly, "Thank you." "I'm Zoe." "I know. Your dad said." Victoria looked down at the blanket in her lap, blue with little yellow stars. The kind of blanket that gets washed 100 times and stays anyway. "My name is Victoria." "That's a fancy name." "I've never liked it much." Zoe considered this. "What do people call you?" "At work? Miss Sterling. Before that—" A pause. A small pause, but Ethan noticed it from across the room where he was opening the first aid kit. "My mom used to call me Vicky." "I'll call you Vicky," Zoe decided, and sat down on the other end of the couch. Ethan cleaned the cut above her eye and the split in her lip. She sat perfectly still for it, watching his face while he worked the way people watch someone they're trying to read. He'd been read before. He let her look. "You were a Marine," she said. It wasn't a question. "2 tours. Got out 8 years ago." "What do you do now?" "HVAC. Own a small outfit. 3 guys. It's steady." "And Zoe's mother?" He didn't answer right away. "Car accident. 5 years ago." "I'm sorry." "Yeah." He pressed a butterfly bandage across the eyebrow cut. "Me too." She was quiet then. "You didn't have to stop." "No." "Most people don't stop." I'm not most people. He sat back, capped the antiseptic. Your arm. I think it might be fractured. Radial head, maybe. We need to splint it tonight and get it properly imaged tomorrow. You know medicine? I know field trauma. Different thing. But it'll hold. She watched him start to splint her forearm with a wooden ruler and athletic tape from the kit. Improvised, but solid. His hands were steady, practiced. Why are you doing this? She asked. He looked up at her. The honest answer, he said. Please. Because you were in the road. Because you were hurt. Because there were men with guns trying to put you back wherever you came from. He looked back down at the splint. And because Zoe was watching. I'm not going to let my daughter see me drive past someone who needs help. Victoria Sterling didn't say anything to that for a long time. When she spoke again, her voice had dropped just below the level she'd been holding it at all night. The CEO voice. The organized voice. The voice that had held itself together through 3 hours of being hunted through the streets. I haven't told anyone the whole story, she said. What Marcus has done. What they've been planning. You don't have to tell me anything. I know. She looked at his daughter, asleep now against the far arm of the couch, the star blanket pulled up to her chin. I want to. Ethan set down the tape, sat back in the chair across from the couch, crossed his arms, and listened the way men listen who have spent time in places where the wrong information, or the wrong silence, gets people killed. She talked for a long time. She talked about her father, Robert Sterling, who built the company from a 2-room software office in 1987 and ran it until the stroke that took half his mobility and all of his fight. About taking over at 31, the youngest female CEO of a Fortune 500 company, the disabled one in the room who used a leg brace and a cane and somehow was still expected to prove every month that she belonged in the seat her father had given her. She talked about meeting Marcus Chen at a tech summit in San Francisco. Brilliant, attentive, exactly the kind of man who knew how to make a woman feel seen in a room full of people who were looking through her. About how he'd positioned himself on the board, about the relationship growing, deepening, the proposal she'd said yes to in Paris, the ring she'd stopped wearing 6 months ago when she first noticed the discrepancies in the quarterly numbers. I didn't say anything at first, she said. I told myself I was wrong, that I was misreading. Marcus he was good at making me feel like I was misreading things. That's a skill, Ethan said. It's a weapon, she corrected. I know the difference now. She talked about her chief financial officer, a man named Gerald Price, who'd been moved onto the board under Marcus's recommendation 2 years ago, about the amendments buried in bylaw revisions that she'd signed without understanding their full implication. Provisions that had, in retrospect, been precisely engineered to strip her authority in the event of her death or incapacitation. They don't need me dead, she said. They need me incapacitated, declared mentally unfit. Tonight was supposed to produce evidence of an episode, a public breakdown, maybe an arrest. Something on record that Marcus could take to the board on Monday morning and say, look, I've been concerned about her stability for months. I've had 12 surgeries on this leg since then. I run a $6 billion company from a wheelchair on bad days and a cane on good ones. And every single quarter, someone in that boardroom looks at me like they're calculating how much longer before I'd give up. Her voice was even, not angry, just factual, the way people talk about things they've made peace with carrying. When someone says I'm tougher than I look, what they mean is I've surprised them. And what that means is their expectation was low. Ethan nodded slowly. Fair point. You didn't look at me like that, she said. In the road. You just looked at me like I was a person who needed help. He didn't say anything. He didn't need to. It was almost 2 in the morning when she finished. Zoe hadn't moved. Victoria's tea, Ethan had made it somewhere in the middle of the Marcus and the Paris proposal section, sat on the coffee table mostly untouched and fully cold. The rain had slowed to something quieter, less urgent, barely more than a sound on the roof. "What's on Monday?" Ethan asked. "Exactly. Walk me through it." "There's a full board meeting at 9 a.m., Sterling Tech headquarters, downtown. The agenda, officially, is the Q3 report. But Marcus has filed a motion under the Emergency Provisions Clause, requesting a vote of no confidence in my continued leadership. He needs a simple majority. That's 7 of 13 board members. He already has 6 committed. He needs 1 more. And if you don't show? If I'm not there, the motion passes by default under Article 14 of the amended bylaws, which were, again, amended under my signature, because I am an idiot who trusted the wrong person." "You're not an idiot," Ethan said. She stopped, started again. "I loved him, and that made me not look at things I should have looked at. Which is a different kind of stupid, I know. But it doesn't feel that different from the inside." "No," Ethan agreed. "It doesn't." She looked at him. "You've been there." "I've been in the vicinity." He stood up, picked up the cold tea, took it to the kitchen, came back. "Okay, so you have to be in that boardroom Monday morning." "With the evidence I've compiled, yes." "Where's the evidence?" She touched her temple. "Some of it's up here. Some of it is in the secure cloud partition with an attorney in Chicago who doesn't know Marcus and has no connection to anyone on the board. And some of it," she paused, "some of it is in my apartment, which I can't go back to tonight." "No," Ethan agreed, "you can't." "So," she spread her good hand, a small, precise gesture, the kind of motion someone makes when they've laid out a problem and are opening the floor. "That's where I am." Ethan looked at his daughter asleep on the couch, at the star blanket rising and falling with slow, uncomplicated breath, at this woman, who had every reason in the world to be broken and wasn't, who had held herself together through a night that would have finished most people, who had told her story with the clean, unflinching clarity of someone who had decided that the truth was the only weapon she had left. He thought about what it cost to ask a stranger for help. Not the pride of it, he understood pride, but the deeper thing, the trust of it, the way it meant opening up the wound where someone else had already been. "You can stay here tonight," he said. "The guest room's made up. Tomorrow, we figure out the next move." She opened her mouth. "Don't argue," he said. "You're in no condition to go anywhere, and you've got nowhere safe to go. So, guest room, tomorrow." She closed her mouth. Then, "Why are you doing this? Still, the real answer." He was quiet for a moment. "I pulled a kid out of a burning vehicle in Ramadi," he said finally. 19 years old. Kid from Biloxi, who'd never been outside Mississippi before the Corps shipped him out. He'd have burned in that truck if I'd waited another 30 seconds. He looked at her. "I didn't stop and calculate the risk. I just went. And for the next 8 years, every time it got hard, every time I thought about giving up on something that mattered, I thought about that kid. About what happens when someone just goes without calculating." A pause. Outside, the rain finally stopped. In the other room, on the floor just inside Zoe's doorway, Ethan's phone buzzed. A text. Unknown number. 4 words. "We know where you are." Ethan read the text twice. Then a third time, slower. The way you read something when part of your brain is hoping the words will rearrange themselves into something less serious. They didn't. He walked back to the living room. Victoria was still on the couch, the star blanket over her legs, eyes half closed but not sleeping. He could tell the difference. Her breathing was too controlled for sleep. "We've got a problem," he said. She opened her eyes all the way. He turned the phone toward her. She read it. Her face didn't change much. A slight tightening around the eyes, a small shift in her jaw. But he'd been watching her closely enough by now to read it. She'd expected this. Not hoped for it. Expected it. "How?" she asked. "I don't know. Could be Derek before I took his phone. Could be a camera on the street. Could be they've been tracking you some other way." "My leg brace." She said it with a flat, quiet tone of someone who has just confirmed something they didn't want to confirm. "There's a GPS module in the original brace. Standard medical tracking. My orthopedic team uses it to monitor gait data. Marcus knew about it. He asked about it when I first got the new unit fitted." She paused. "You have anything I can disable this with without hurting you?" "The release is at the back of the knee. 2 clips. The whole lower unit detaches." He worked the clips, eased the lower section off carefully. She bit down again, that same controlled exhale. And he moved slowly, giving her every second she needed. When it came free, he took it to the kitchen, put the module unit on the tile, and hit it 3 times with the base of a cast iron skillet until the casing cracked and the board inside went dark. When he came back, she was sitting up straighter. "How long since the text?" she asked. 4 minutes. "Then they know the general area. They'll be triangulating from the last strong ping. They might have a 4 or 5 block radius." "This is a residential street. Middle of the night. They can't exactly go door to door without drawing attention." "Marcus's people don't go door to door," she said. "They sit at the end of the block and wait. And when you move..." The voice on the other end was rough with sleep, but not disoriented. The voice of someone who'd spent enough years in situations that required snapping awake fast that they never quite stopped. "Not yet," Ethan said. "I need a favor, Ray." A pause. The sound of someone sitting up. "What kind of favor?" "The kind you don't ask about on the phone." Another pause. Longer. Then, "When?" "Now would be good. Give me 20 minutes." He hung up. Victoria was watching him with that evaluating look again. "Who is Ray?" "Ray Booker. We served together. 2 tours. He lives 6 blocks from here. Drives a beat-up Silverado that looks exactly like mine. And he owes me a debt he's been trying to pay back for 8 years. "What kind of debt?" "The kind that involves a burning vehicle in Ramadi," Ethan said simply, and didn't expand on it. She didn't push. She was smart enough to understand there were some answers inside other answers. "While we wait," she said, "I need to make a call of my own." "To who?" "My attorney in Chicago, James Whitfield. I told you, he has a partition of the evidence files. He doesn't know what happened tonight. If something happens to me before Monday..." "Nothing is going to happen to you." She looked at him steadily. "You can't promise that." "No," he admitted. "But I can promise I'll do everything I can to make it true. And right now, that's worth more than a guarantee from someone who doesn't have skin in the game." He handed her his phone. "Use mine, not yours. Is your phone on you?" "I lost it somewhere between the second alley and the street." She almost smiled. Almost. Which was probably fortunate. "Yeah, probably." He handed over the phone. "Make your call." He went to check on Zoe while she dialed. His daughter was in her bed now. Sometime between the couch and the tea going cold, she'd walked herself to her room the way she did when she fell asleep somewhere else and woke up just conscious enough to navigate home. He stood in the doorway and watched her breathe for a moment. 7 years old. Brave enough to offer a blanket to a stranger who looked scared. Smart enough not to ask questions she knew weren't hers to ask. So much of her mother in her, it hurt in a specific place under his sternum that he'd stopped trying to name. "I'm handling it," he told the room quietly. Not to Zoe, not really to anyone, just saying it out loud. From the living room, he could hear Victoria's voice, low, urgent, precise, walking James Whitfield through the night's events with that same flat operational clarity, organizing the facts, giving instructions, making sure that if Marcus Chen's people found her before Monday, the damage she could do from the grave was still enough to matter. He thought about what kind of strength that required. Not the physical kind, the other kind. The kind that keeps your voice level when every reasonable part of you wants to come apart. His phone buzzed in her hand. He heard it, saw the light from his bedroom doorway shift. He heard her pause on the call, glance at the screen, and then say to Whitfield, "Hold on, James." She came to the hallway doorway. "Text," she said. "Same unknown number." He walked out, took the phone. The message read, "Tell your friend to bring the girl. This doesn't have to involve the child." Ethan's vision went very quiet and very specific, the way it did in certain moments. The way combat sharpens everything into a single clear point of focus, while all the noise in the periphery drops out. He typed back one word: try. Then he blocked the number, walked to the front window, and looked out through the gap in the curtain without touching it. The street was still. A single car at the far corner, dark, engine probably off. Couldn't see it move. Couldn't be sure it was them. But it probably was. He turned back. Victoria was still in the hallway, watching him. He noticed she hadn't flinched at the message. She'd read it, brought it to him, and her breathing was still even. "Finish your call," he said. She looked at him for one more second, then put the phone back to her ear. "James, still here. Listen carefully." Ray Booker arrived at 2:41 in a gray hoodie and unlaced work boots, looking like a man who'd thrown on whatever was closest to the bedroom door, which he had. He came in through the back, the way Ethan had told him to, through the fence gate with a loose latch that Ethan had never gotten around to fixing and was now retrospectively grateful for. He was a big man, not tall, about Ethan's height, but wide through the shoulders in the way that came from 23 years of physical labor after leaving the Corps. He had a face that had been rearranged by life a few times and had settled into something that looked dependable in the way that old trucks look dependable. When he walked into the kitchen and saw Victoria on the couch through the doorway, he didn't say anything for a moment. Then he looked at Ethan and said, "You couldn't just call me for a beer like a normal person? Would you have come for a beer at 2 in the morning?" "Probably, yeah." Victoria had pulled herself upright. Ray looked at the splint on her arm, the bruising on her face, the cracked brace propped against the coffee table. Then he looked at Ethan with the expression of a man recalibrating his assessment of the situation upward. "Ray Booker," he said to her. "Victoria Sterling." A pause. "Like Sterling Tech?" "Yes." He looked at Ethan again. "Okay," he said, with the tone of someone accepting that the full briefing can come later. "What do you need?" "I need you to take my truck out," Ethan said. "Drive it around the area. Not fast, not suspicious, like you're heading somewhere ordinary. Take it west, toward the highway, park somewhere public, leave it. Rideshare back." And they follow the truck, thinking she's in it. Hopefully. Buys us a few hours of uncertainty while they try to figure out they've been had. Ray nodded slowly. "And meanwhile?" "Meanwhile, I've got some calls to make and some moves to plan." He handed Ray the keys. "You see anybody following close? 2 cars, rotating? Just pull into an all-night gas station and stay visible. Don't engage." "I'm not going to engage," Ray said, mildly offended. "What am I going to do? Get in a fight with some men in suits at 3 in the morning?" "I know what you're capable of at 3 in the morning." Fair point. He took the keys. He looked again at Victoria, at the careful, measured way she was holding herself together, at the hands folded in her lap, the splinted one resting on top, still as something carved. "Miss Sterling," he said, "for what it's worth, I've worked for a lot of people over the years, employers, contractors, couple of guys who ran their companies into the ground while the workers took the hit." He shrugged one shoulder. "Saw the piece on you in the Journal 2 years back, the one about the Disability Employment Initiative." She looked at him. "You did right by people who usually get left out," he said simply. "Whatever's going on, I hope it comes out the way it should." He went out the back without waiting for a response. Victoria watched the space where he'd been for a moment. Then, quietly, "What happened in Ramadi?" Ethan was at the kitchen counter, already thinking forward. "Our vehicle took an IED hit. Ray was driver. He got thrown clear, I didn't. He pulled me out of the wreck before the secondary fire caught." "So you owe him?" "Other way around," Ethan said. "He's been carrying it like he could have gotten there faster." He couldn't have. But you can't talk a man out of something he feels in his chest. He turned and leaned against the counter. "You said some of the evidence is in your apartment." "Yes, a physical drive, encrypted, in the false bottom of my desk drawer. And a file folder in my office safe, combination 4719. The drive has the financial records, bank transfers, shell company routing, the full audit trail showing Marcus's network of people skimming equity." "Who else knows your safe combination?" "My former PA and Marcus." A pause that had weight. "I changed it 6 months ago. Marcus doesn't know the new one." "Does your former PA?" "She left the company. Her choice. She and I had a disagreement about how I was handling Marcus." Victoria's voice was perfectly neutral on this, in the way that neutrality is sometimes a choice you're making very actively. She thought I was in denial. She was right. I wasn't ready to hear it at the time. "Where does she live? I'm not bringing Diane into this." "Is she trustworthy?" "Completely. But she's already lost the job. I'm not—" "Victoria." He said her name the way he'd said "stay down" to Zoe. Not hard, just with the full weight of meaning behind it. "Who gets into that building without raising flags?" A long pause. "Diane has a building access card," she said finally. "She never returned it when she left. Standard HR protocol would have deactivated it, but—" She stopped. "But?" "But I was the one who was supposed to approve the deactivation, and I never did." She closed her eyes briefly. "Because I wasn't ready to close that door either, even with the job gone." She opened them. "I'm a mess, Ethan." "You're human," he said. "Same thing Zoe said about me." She was quiet for a moment. "She's remarkable," Victoria said. "Your daughter?" "I know." "She looks at people like they matter, just automatically. Like it's the obvious default." She turned the cold mug in her good hand. "Most people lose that. Around age 10 or 12, they start calculating whether someone's worth looking at first." "Her mother was like that," Ethan said. "Just genuinely interested in people. Didn't matter who. The cashier, the neighbor, the guy at the garage. She'd walk away knowing their life story, and they'd feel like somebody cared." He was quiet a moment. "I try to keep that in Zoe. I'm not as good at it as her mother was." "You stopped for a stranger in the road at midnight," Victoria said. "In the rain, with your daughter in the back seat." She looked at him. "I think you're doing all right." He didn't answer. He never knew what to do with kindness that was accurate. He moved past it the way men do. "I'm going to call Diane," he said. "If she's willing, We get the drive tomorrow morning, early, before Marcus's people shift their attention from chasing the truck to watching your building. She might say no. Then she says no, and we find another way. He held her eyes. But she deserves the chance to say yes. Victoria looked at him for a long moment, and something shifted in her face. Not a collapse, not a breaking, just a small, almost invisible loosening of something that had been locked tight for a very long time. Like a door opening just a crack, just enough to let the air through. Her number is in my head, she said. I can give it to you. Good. He got his phone back, opened a new contact. Go ahead. She recited it from memory. Of course she did. She'd told Zoe she had a photographic memory, and that had not been the boast of a woman trying to establish credibility. It was just a fact she carried, the way she carried the titanium rod and the cracked brace, and the 4 years of a relationship that had been building a trap around her while she called it love. What time is it? She asked. Almost 3. You should sleep, she said. You have a daughter to take care of tomorrow. So do you. She blinked. What? He looked at Zoe's room door, then back at her. Tomorrow, she's going to want to know you're still here. She already decided you matter. And like you said, she doesn't calculate. Victoria Sterling held the cold mug in her lap and said absolutely nothing. From outside, very faintly, came the sound of his truck pulling away from the curb. Ray Booker, doing the thing men do for each other when the debt is deep enough that no specific request is required. Just the call at 2 a.m. and the showing up. Ethan went to the window and watched the taillights until they turned the corner. The car that had been sitting at the end of the block pulled away 30 seconds later. He exhaled. They followed. How long does that buy us? He thought about it. Depends on how smart they are and how fast they figure out you're not in that truck. He turned from the window. I'd say 3 hours, maybe 4. Then we need to use every minute. Yes, he agreed. And they did. Diane Mercer picked up on the second ring. It was 3:14 in the morning, and she picked up like she'd been waiting for the call, which maybe she had. Or maybe she was just the kind of person who kept a phone on her nightstand and understood that calls at that hour were never casual. Victoria? Her voice was sharp, awake, no pretense of sleep in it. It's not Victoria, Ethan said. My name is Ethan Calloway. Victoria is safe and she's with me. She gave me this number. A short silence. Careful, not hostile, just the silence of someone taking the full measure of a situation before responding. Is she hurt? Some. She's been treated. She'll be okay. He paused. You knew something was wrong. I've known something was wrong for 6 months, Diane said. I left that company because I couldn't watch it happen, and I couldn't make her see it. And before you say anything, I know I should have stayed. I've been living with that every day since. Her voice had an edge to it, not at him, at herself. Where is she? I can't tell you that on an open line. What I can tell you is that we need access to her building tomorrow morning, early, and we need the drive from her desk. Silence again, longer this time. You know about the drive? Diane said. She told me everything. 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 Another pause. Then, quietly. She must trust you an extraordinary amount for someone she just met. I don't know if it's trust exactly, Ethan said. I think it might be that she ran out of options, and I happened to be the one standing in the road. Diane made a sound that was not quite a laugh. That's very modest. It's accurate. Mr. Calloway, her voice shifted. The soft edge dropped out, and what was underneath was precise, focused. The voice of someone who had spent years managing the details of a complicated life for a complicated woman, and had gotten very good at it. Victoria's building access card system resets authorization at 6 a.m. My card will either work or it won't. If Marcus has been thorough, and Marcus is always thorough, there's a real possibility he's already flagged my credentials. What time does building security change shifts? A pause. 6:30. So there's a window between 6 and 6:30 where the system is freshly reset, but the outgoing security team is already thinking about going home. That's a very narrow window, Diane said. I've worked with narrower. She was quiet for a moment, and he could almost feel her making the calculation. The risk on one side, the 8 months of guilt and regret on the other, and whatever she still felt for the woman she'd worked beside for 6 years, sitting somewhere in the middle of it all. Is she going to be in that boardroom Monday? Diane asked. That's the plan. Then I'll meet you at the corner of Peachtree and 15th at 6:15, she said. Come alone. I'll know if you don't. She hung up. Ethan walked back to the living room. Victoria was still on the couch, but she'd shifted, turned slightly sideways, her good arm wrapped around herself, the star blanket tucked under her splinted arm. She was awake. She'd been listening to every word she could catch through the quiet house. She said yes, Ethan told her. Victoria closed her eyes for just a second. I didn't think she would. She said she's been carrying 8 months of guilt. She has nothing to feel guilty about. Her jaw tightened. I was the one who... I know, Ethan said. Tell her that, not me. She opened her eyes and looked at him, nodded once, small and precise. Try to sleep, he said. I mean it this time. You've got 4 hours. What about you? I'll be up. Ethan, you have to sleep too. I'll sleep when this is over. He settled into the chair across from her, picked up his phone, and started going through what he knew, building the next 12 hours in his head the way he'd been trained to build an operation. From the objective backward, identifying every point where something could go wrong and what the contingency looked like if it did. Victoria watched him for a moment. Then she said, very quietly, Thank you for calling her. I know I said, You said she might say no, he said without looking up from the phone. She said yes. That's all that matters now. She settled back into the cushions. The rain had stopped completely. The house was the kind of still that only exists at 3 a.m. in a residential neighborhood. Not silence exactly, but the low, breathing quiet of a place where ordinary lives are paused for a few hours. He could hear Zoe's soft, even breathing from down the hall. He wasn't sure exactly when Victoria fell asleep, but when he looked up 20 minutes later, her breathing had changed, and the set of her face had loosened in the way that you can't fake and can't maintain if you're still carrying the weight of the day. She looked younger. She looked, he thought, like someone who had been holding an enormous thing for a very long time, and had finally, in the space of this small, borrowed house with a stranger keeping watch, set it down for a few hours. He turned the lamp off and sat in the dark. At 5:45 he woke Zoe. She surfaced the way she always did, not gradually, but all at once, like a light turning on. Eyes open, fully present, looking at him with immediate alertness. Is the lady still here? She whispered. Sleeping, he said. Listen, I have to go out for a little while this morning. Early errand. I need you to stay with Victoria. She can't move around much because of her arm and her leg, but she'll be awake when you get up, and I need you to... I'll take care of her, Zoe said, as if this were completely obvious, as if there were no other possible response to this information. He looked at his daughter, 7 years old and completely certain of what the right thing was. He had not earned this kid. He was absolutely sure of that. I'll be back by 7:30. Mrs. Patterson across the street has my number if anything. Daddy, I said I'll take care of her. A pause. Is she going to be okay? For real okay, not grown-up okay. He thought about the honest answer. I'm working on it, he said. Zoe nodded, satisfied with the honesty, in a way she wouldn't have been with reassurance. She pulled the covers up to her chin. Go do your errand. He kissed her on the forehead, got his jacket, and went. Diane Mercer was already at the corner when he pulled up in the rideshare at 6:12. She was a small woman, late 40s, with the kind of posture that comes from years of presenting herself as competent in rooms where people were looking for reasons to dismiss her. She had a tote bag over one shoulder and a key card already in her hand. She looked at him the way she'd probably looked at people her entire professional life. Quick, comprehensive, filing and categorizing before the other person had fully registered she was watching. Ethan Calloway, she said. Diane Mercer. You look like military, she said. Marines. And now? HVAC. She processed this. And Victoria trusted you because... Because I was there, he said, and I didn't leave. Something moved in Diane's face. A small recalibration. The drive is in the false bottom of her center desk drawer, she said. Pull the drawer completely out. Flip it over. There's a release tab on the underside. You'll feel it. The drive is in a cloth pouch. She handed him the keycard. 7th floor. Her office is at the end of the east wing. If security stops you at the elevator, you're a building maintenance contractor for the HVAC unit on 7. There's been a reported air circulation issue all week. I put in the work order myself 2 months ago, and it was never resolved. The paperwork is real. He looked at her. You planned for this. I planned for something, she said. I didn't know what shape it would take. She looked down at the keycard in his hand. The safe. You'll need the combination. She gave it to me. 4719. Diane blinked. Then slowly, she said, She changed it. 6 months ago, the expression on Diane's face was complicated. Relief and grief together. The look of someone realizing that a door they thought had shut permanently was still open, just a crack. She never told me. No, he said, but she still has the number in her head. Same as yours. He met her eyes. She remembers the things that matter to her, Diane, even when she's not ready to say so. Diane looked away for a moment, jaw working, composing herself with the practiced efficiency of someone who had spent years doing that in professional settings and had gotten almost too good at it. Be fast, she said when she looked back. You have the window I told you. Don't linger. I won't. He went. The building was the kind of quiet that expensive office towers have at 6 in the morning. Not empty, but between shifts of activity. The lobby security guard was a heavy-set man in his late 50s who looked like he was mentally already on his drive home. He glanced at Ethan, glanced at the keycard, looked at the maintenance jacket Ethan had grabbed from the back of the truck before leaving, one of his own company jackets. C.E. Calloway HVAC in blocked letters across the back, and waved him through with barely a word. The elevator to 7, the east wing. At the end of the corridor, the door with Victoria M. Sterling, CEO, on the nameplate in clean silver letters. He used the keycard. The door opened. He didn't turn on the overhead light. The early morning coming through the east-facing windows was enough. He moved to the desk, a large, clean-lined piece organized with the precision of someone who used their space as an extension of their thinking, and pulled the center drawer all the way out. Flipped it. Found the release tab on the underside, pressed it, and the false bottom dropped open. The cloth pouch was there. He took it, slid the drawer back, and moved to the wall safe behind the painting on the east wall. 4719. The door swung open. The file folder was there, thick, tabbed, organized with the kind of systematic thoroughness that doesn't happen in a hurry. This had been assembled over months, maybe longer. He took it, closed the safe, and was back in the corridor in under 4 minutes. On the way back through the lobby, the security guard didn't even look up. Outside, he called Diane from the sidewalk. "I have it," he said. A long exhale on her end. "Okay." A pause. Is she really going to be okay? He thought about the woman asleep on his couch with his daughter's star blanket and a splint made from a ruler and tape. The woman who'd cried once without crying and said thank you in a voice that had to find its way through 4 years of wrong choices to reach the surface. "She's tougher than she looks," he said. And for the first time, he said it the way she'd taught him to mean it. He was back before 7:30, as promised. He came through the back door and found Zoe and Victoria at the kitchen table. Zoe had made cereal. 2 bowls, both with too much milk because she always poured too much milk. And Victoria was eating with her good hand and listening to Zoe explain the rules of a card game with the focused attention of someone who is genuinely interested and not performing it. He stood in the doorway for a moment before either of them saw him. This was the thing about ordinary moments. They didn't announce themselves. They just were, and then they were over, and later you realized you should have stayed in them longer. "Daddy's back," Zoe announced. Victoria looked up. Her eyes went immediately to the tote bag in his hand. Diane's tote, carrying everything they'd come for. Something shifted in her face. Not relief exactly. More like the moment before a battle when the last supply line confirms it's through, and you understand that whatever comes next, you're no longer fighting empty. "You got it," she said. "Everything." He set the bag on the table. "Diane sends her regards." Victoria's hand went very still on the cereal spoon. "How was she?" "She asked if you were going to be okay." He held her eyes. "I told her yes." Victoria looked down at the bowl. The muscle in her jaw moved once. She didn't have to do that. Come out at 6 in the morning? Take that risk? "She wanted to," Ethan said simply. "People who care about you tend to want to." The words landed. He could see them land. Zoe, who had been watching this exchange with the calm intelligence of a child who understands far more of the adult world than adults remember, reached over and patted Victoria's good hand twice. Firm, decisive pats. The kind that meant, "I see you, and you're going to be fine," in the language of 7-year-olds who have already lost one person who mattered, and understand at a bone-deep level that you don't wait to make people feel seen. Victoria looked down at the small hand on hers, and this time the thing in her face that had almost broken twice in 12 hours, once in the living room with the star blanket, once when he'd said Zoe still wanted her here, actually broke. Quietly, and without performance. The way things break when there's no reason left to hold them together. She didn't make a sound. She just put her hand over Zoe's and held it. Ethan went to the counter and poured himself a coffee that had been sitting since before he'd left and was lukewarm now, and he didn't care. "We have work to do," he said. "But there's time. Eat your cereal." Victoria laughed. A real one, brief and unguarded, surprised out of her by the pure practicality of it. She wiped her eye with the back of her splinted wrist in a motion that was almost graceful and said, "Yes, okay." They ate, and then they got to work. James Whitfield arrived from Chicago by noon. He was a precise, careful man of about 60, who had the courtroom calm of someone who had made a life out of being the least emotional person in very emotional situations. He came into Ethan's living room with a rolling briefcase, shook hands, and surveyed the tableau. The disabled CEO on the couch with a splinted arm. The Marine-turned-vac contractor sitting across from her. The documents and drive and folder spread across the coffee table like a battlefield map, and said simply, "Walk me through everything." They did. For the next 3 hours, Whitfield worked. He called in 2 junior associates from his firm via video, requested additional documents from the cloud partition, and cross-referenced the financial records from the drive with the file folder, with the methodical intensity of someone building a structure that could not be knocked down. Victoria and Whitfield spoke in the language of law: statutes, provisions, evidentiary thresholds, procedural maneuvers. And Ethan sat on the far side of the room and listened, following most of it, letting the parts he didn't follow slide past, because the parts that mattered were clear enough. They had the evidence. They had the documentation. They had the chain of transactions, the shell company routing, the amendment paper trail, the text messages Whitfield had already secured from the cloud partition showing Marcus and 2 board members discussing the timing of Victoria's removal with a casualness that would look catastrophic on a screen in front of a federal judge. What they needed was to get Victoria into that boardroom Monday morning, alive and functional, and with enough support to withstand whatever Marcus attempted when he understood his position had collapsed. "Who on the board don't they have?" Ethan asked. Whitfield looked up from his laptop. "There are 6 board members whose votes are unaccounted for in Marcus's communications." "Unaccounted for meaning they haven't committed to his side?" "Correct." "How many do we need?" 7 of 13 is the threshold for the no-confidence motion. Marcus has 6 committed. If we can lock 3 of the remaining 6 before the meeting. "He doesn't have his majority," Victoria finished. "Correct." Whitfield looked at her. "The question is how you reach them without Marcus knowing you're still active and operational. If he knows you're building a counter-coalition before Monday..." "He escalates," Ethan said. "Yes, which means we operate quietly." Victoria had been thinking while they talked, and when she thought, she went very still in a specific way. Not distracted, just interior, processing at a speed that her face didn't advertise. "Eleanor Chow," she said. Whitfield looked at her. "The independent board member. She's never liked Marcus. She voted against his initial appointment, and she's made her skepticism known in private sessions twice in the last year. She doesn't have the votes on her own, but if Eleanor publicly announces her support for me before the meeting..." "The undecided members follow," Whitfield said slowly. "Nobody wants to be on the wrong side of Eleanor Chow." "Can you reach her?" Ethan asked. "I've known Eleanor for 11 years, Victoria said. "She'll take my call." A pause. "If I can convince her, I'm still standing." "You are still standing," Zoe said from the hallway. Every adult in the room turned. She was standing in the doorway in her socks, holding a juice box, having clearly listened to the last portion of this conversation without anyone noticing. "Zoe," Ethan started. "She is, though," Zoe said with the patient reasonableness of a child correcting a factual error. She looked at Victoria. "You're standing up. You've been standing up the whole time." She considered this. "Not literally, but the other kind." Nobody said anything for a moment. Then Eleanor Chow's name was at the top of the list, and Victoria reached for the phone. The call lasted 40 minutes. Ethan could hear fragments of it from the kitchen where he was making sandwiches, because it was past noon, and nobody had eaten since cereal. And some situations require fuel, regardless of their gravity. He couldn't hear Eleanor Chow's side. He could hear Victoria's, measured at first, then gradually dropping the CEO register and becoming just a voice, honest and undefended, and telling the truth about what had happened and what was at stake. At one point, silence for almost 2 full minutes. Then Victoria said, very quietly, "I know, Eleanor. I know I should have seen it sooner, but I'm seeing it now." A pause. and I'm asking you to see it with me." Another silence. Then, "Thank you." She came back into the kitchen. Her good hand was at her side, and she was walking differently than she had all morning. Straighter. Something restored in her that had nothing to do with the physical. "She's in," Victoria said. "She'll announce support before the meeting?" "Sunday evening. She'll send a formal communication to the full board." Whitfield, who had followed them both to the kitchen doorway, said, "That changes the calculus significantly," in the tone of a man who does not often allow himself to sound encouraged, and was allowing it now. Ethan handed Victoria a sandwich. "Eat," he said. "We've still got work." She looked at the sandwich, looked at him, and said, with a smile that was small and real, and nothing like the polished thing she probably deployed in boardrooms, "You say that like it's simple." "It usually is," he said. "Most things are, once you cut through the noise." She took the sandwich. By 3 that afternoon, they had a plan. It wasn't a comfortable plan. There were variables they couldn't control, and pressure points they couldn't fully protect. Marcus would know by Sunday that the board communication had gone out from Eleanor. He would react. The reaction would be fast and probably disproportionate, because men who've spent years building something and feel it beginning to come apart don't become cautious. They become desperate. And desperate men with resources were, in Ethan's experience, the most dangerous kind. He was sitting at the kitchen table with the pieces of this laid out in front of him when Ray called. "They figured it out," Ray said. "2 cars picked up my tail, followed me to a Waffle House on Moreland, sat in the lot for about 40 minutes. Then one of them came inside and looked around." A pause. "I was finishing my 3rd cup of coffee. The guy saw me, and he knew. I could tell he knew." "Did he approach?" "No. Went back to the car. Both cars left." A beat. "They're coming back to you, man. Probably already triangulating from the signal they lost." Ethan looked at the clock. 3:07 p.m. Sunday was 30 hours away. Monday was 42. "How many people do you think they're running?" he asked. "From what I saw, 4, maybe 6. Not a small operation." Ray paused. "I still owe you, Ethan. You paid that debt the moment you took those keys last night." "I paid it the moment I pulled you out of a burning truck," Ray said. "Everything after that is because I want to." A pause. "What do you need?" Ethan looked through the kitchen doorway at Victoria, who was on the couch with the legal documents across her lap and a pen in her good hand and her glasses on. He hadn't known about the glasses. She'd found them in her jacket pocket, and was working through the paperwork with the focused intensity of someone who understands that the outcome of Monday depends entirely on the preparation of Sunday. He looked at Zoe's drawings on the refrigerator, the one of the 3 of them she'd done last year. Him, her, and a space beside them that she'd left blank, without ever explaining why she'd left it blank. "I need you," he said. "And I need you to bring anyone you trust." Ray said, "I'll make some calls." And the next phase of the plan began. Ray showed up at 4:30 with 2 men Ethan knew and 1 he didn't. The 2 he knew were Tommy Reese and Calvin Garrett, both former Corps, both solid. The kind of men who showed up when the call came and didn't ask for details until they were already there. The one he didn't know was introduced as Danny Park, Ray's neighbor, 32 years old, former Army Ranger with a current civilian job doing private security for a financial firm downtown. "He knows the Sterling Tech building," Ray said. "Security layout, entry points, shift patterns. He did a contract there 2 years ago." Ethan looked at Danny Park, who was lean and quiet, with the alert stillness of someone who spent his professional life assessing threats before other people registered them. "You know what we're walking into?" Ethan asked. "Ray gave me the broad strokes," Danny said. "Corporate coup, Ex-fiancé with private muscle, board meeting Monday morning. He paused. I've worked worse. We're not going to war, Ethan said clearly. This gets resolved in a boardroom, not in the street. What I need is a perimeter, transport, eyes on anyone who moves toward her between now and 9 a.m. Monday. No engagement unless there's no other choice. Understood, Danny said. Tommy and Calvin nodded. They'd heard versions of this briefing before. The one that said, minimize force, in a tone that also said, but be ready. Victoria came into the living room from where she'd been working, moving carefully with one hand on the wall for balance. She'd refused the idea of crutches from Ethan's garage, with the argument that she'd been navigating mobility limitations her entire adult life, and a cracked brace wasn't going to rearrange her methods. She looked at the four men standing in various positions around the small living room, and something crossed her face. Not intimidation, more like the recognition of a thing she hadn't expected and was adjusting to in real time. "These are the people?" she asked Ethan. "These are the people." She looked at each of them in turn. The look she gave wasn't performative. It wasn't the confident CEO scan. It was the other look, the one he'd been seeing since the road. The one that was just her, without the armor. "You don't know me," she said to the room. "You have no obligation here. Whatever Ethan said when he called, you're not on the hook for any of this." Ray crossed his arms. "Ma'am, with respect, if we felt like we were on the hook, we wouldn't have come." Tommy Reese, who was a man of very few words that were entirely reliable, said simply, "What do you need us to do?" Victoria held his gaze for a moment. Then she turned to the coffee table where the documents were laid out, the drive and folder, and Whitfield's annotated legal summary, and she started talking. She walked them through it the way she'd walked Ethan through it the first night, but faster, sharper, with less of the personal material and more of the operational detail. The way you brief people who need the map without the history. When she finished, Danny Park said, "Marcus Chen's private team. Do we have an ID on the individual assets?" Derek Holt is the one Ethan encountered Thursday night. There were two others in the SUV, but I didn't see their faces clearly. She paused. Marcus doesn't use a regular firm. He has a relationship with a private contractor named Sloan. Works out of a security consulting company called Vantage Protective Group. They're legitimate on the surface. Clients include 3 Fortune 100 companies. Danny nodded slowly. "I know Vantage. Worked alongside them on a protection detail in Dubai 4 years ago. They're professional, which means they're predictable." He looked at Ethan. "Professional security runs patterns. We can work around patterns." "Then that's what we do," Ethan said. Sunday came in fast and hard. Eleanor Chow's message went to the full board at 7 p.m., exactly as she'd promised. Whitfield called at 7:12 to confirm it had been received and forwarded. By 7:45, Marcus Chen called Victoria's number. She'd borrowed Ethan's second phone, a spare he kept for work that he hadn't mentioned until she'd needed it, and had that number distributed to Whitfield, Diane, and Eleanor only. Her original number was still gone, lost somewhere in the alleys of Thursday night. So when Marcus's call came, it came to the right phone at the right time, and she'd been half expecting it since 7 p.m. She looked at the screen, then at Ethan. "Let it ring," he said. "If I let it ring, he knows I'm operational and choosing not to answer. That tells him that you're not afraid of him," Ethan said, which is exactly what he should know right now. She looked at the screen for one more second. Then she set it face down on the table and let it ring through. The voicemail notification came 90 seconds later. She put it on speaker. Ethan stood close enough to hear. Marcus Chen's voice was exactly what Ethan had expected from the picture Victoria had built of him over 2 days. Smooth, calibrated, intelligent in the way that's more dangerous than loud. He sounded less like a man whose plan was unraveling, and more like a man reshuffling his cards. Victoria, I know you've been talking to Eleanor. I know what you think you have. I need you to hear me when I say this. Whatever Whitfield has told you about the evidentiary weight of those documents, he's not accounting for how the board will actually respond when they understand the full context. This doesn't have to be adversarial. Call me back. We can still resolve this in a way that protects your father's legacy and your position at the company you built. But we need to talk before tomorrow morning. Please. The message ended. The room was quiet for a moment. Tommy Reese said, very quietly, "He's scared." "He's managing," Victoria corrected, but her voice was tight. "That's what Marcus does when he's scared. He manages. He calls it resolution, and what he means is surrender on his terms." She reached out and deleted the voicemail with one deliberate tap. "I've spent 4 years hearing that voice tell me it was trying to protect me. I know exactly what it sounds like when it's protecting itself." Ethan watched her. "You okay?" "No," she said honestly. "But I will be." He nodded. That was the right answer. He'd have been concerned if it had been the other one. At 9 p.m., Danny came in from the porch where he'd been watching the street and said, "We've got company. Single vehicle, end of the block. Different car than Thursday, but the behavior is the same. Engine off, no movement, position for a sightline on the front approach." "How many?" Ethan asked. "2, I think. Maybe 3. Calvin was already on his feet. "You want us to encourage them to relocate?" "No contact," Ethan said. "Not unless they make a move. We don't give Marcus anything to take to the police tonight. Anything that paints us as the aggression." He looked at Danny. "You said Vantage runs patterns. What's their standard approach when they're holding a position overnight?" "Shift rotation, 90 minutes. One car leaves, another arrives. They'll stay active, but they won't push unless they get a directive from the client." Danny paused. "The directive comes if the client gets desperate enough. If Chen thinks his window is closing, and after Eleanor's message, he knows it is, he may authorize something more active before morning." "How much more active?" "Depends on what he's told them to protect." Danny looked at Victoria, without the look being about Victoria. It was a threat assessment, clean and professional. If his only goal was to prevent her from reaching the boardroom, the options are wide. "The boardroom isn't the only thing," Victoria said. She'd been quiet for a moment, and when she spoke, it was in the tone that meant she'd worked something out. "Whitfield, if they can't stop me, they'll try to stop the evidence. If the evidence can be characterized as fraudulently obtained or improperly handled, the board has grounds to defer the vote pending an investigation. That buys Marcus weeks, maybe months." "Can they do that?" Ethan asked. "They can try. Whitfield's filing has the proper chain of custody, but if someone files an injunction tonight—" She stopped. "I need to call James." "Call him." She was on the phone in 30 seconds, pulling Whitfield back into the problem, talking fast and precise, the two of them running through legal scenarios with the focused urgency of people who understand that some fights happen on paper and some happen in hallways, and the paper fights are won in the hours before the hallway ones. Ethan went to check on Zoe. She was in her room, awake and reading. She'd been remarkably self-contained through all of this, present when it mattered, out of the way when it didn't, processing things in the particular interior way she had that sometimes made him feel she understood more than she let on, and sometimes made him certain of it. "It's late," he said. "I know." She looked up from her book. "Is it going to be okay tomorrow?" "I think so." "But you're not sure?" "No," he said. "I'm not sure." She nodded, absorbing this, respecting it. "Victoria was crying a little bit earlier, when you were outside with Ray." He was quiet. "I sat with her," Zoe said. "I didn't say anything. Sometimes when I'm sad, I don't want people to say things. I just want them to stay." She looked at him steadily. "So I stayed." He sat on the edge of her bed and didn't say anything for a moment. Then, "You're a good person, Zoe." "I know," she said simply, without ego. "Mommy said it was the most important thing to be." He kissed her forehead and told her to sleep, and she did, and he sat in the hallway for a moment before he went back, because some things need a second before you walk back into the operational tempo of the rest of the world. Marcus made his second move at 11:15. It wasn't physical, not yet. It was a legal filing, dropped into Whitfield's system at 11:17. An emergency injunction application citing concerns about the integrity of documents obtained from Sterling Tech property without authorization, citing a potential breach of corporate confidentiality, requesting the court defer any presentation of said materials at Monday's board meeting, pending a hearing. Whitfield called at 11:22. He found a judge, Whitfield said, and the control in his voice had a specific quality, not panic, more like the tone of a chess player watching their opponent make an unexpected move and recalculating fast. "The filing is thin and I can beat it, but the hearing is set for 8 a.m. tomorrow. If I'm in a courtroom at 8, you can't be in the boardroom at 9, Victoria said. "I'll call my associate Sarah Chen. No relation. She's sharp, she knows the file. But the judge will read the optics of a substitute attorney arriving at the last minute." "James," Victoria's voice cut through, level and certain. "File the counter immediately. I'll waive Whitfield and Associates' physical presence at the board meeting. The documents are filed with the board secretary as of 6 p.m. today. That's already on record. The injunction can't undo what's already been distributed." A pause on Whitfield's end. "The distribution was, Diane confirmed delivery to all 13 board members at 6:17 p.m. I asked her to do it as soon as Eleanor's communication went out. She looked at Ethan while she talked, and he was watching her with the particular attention of someone who is updating their understanding of a person in real time. The injunction is irrelevant. The information is already with the board. Marcus is spending legal fees on a door that's already open." Silence on the line. Then Whitfield said, with the exact controlled satisfaction of a man who operates in very high-stakes environments and permits himself very small expressions of it. "Miss Sterling, I have to say—" "File the counter," she said. "Make sure it's iron. I'll see you at 9. She hung up. The room looked at her. "You already sent the documents," Ethan said. "At 6:17, she confirmed. "Before Marcus called. Before the voicemail. Before Eleanor's message even fully circulated." She held his gaze. "I've been watching Marcus operate for 4 years. I know what he does when he feels the ground moving. He files injunctions. He delays. He creates procedural obstacles because his actual position is weak and he knows it." She set the phone down. "I removed the obstacle before he could build it." Ray Booker made a sound from across the room that was something between a laugh and a statement of respect. "Lady played him. I've been watching him play me for 4 years, she said, and the evenness of her voice had a particular texture to it. Not bitterness, not satisfaction. Something harder to name. The tone of someone who has reclaimed a tool that was used against them and is holding it differently now. "I learned fast. They moved at 6 a.m., not from Ethan's house. That location was blown, and had been since Saturday morning, when Ray confirmed the tail had relocated back. They'd spent Sunday night in a rotation of vigilance, 2 people awake at all times, monitoring the street and the legal threads and the board communications that were quietly, incrementally shifting in Victoria's direction. By midnight Sunday, 2 of the 6 unaligned board members had sent private responses to Eleanor Chow's communication, indicating they would be present and prepared to vote in Victoria's favor. By 2 a.m., a third. By 4 a.m., a fourth. Marcus had his 6. Victoria now had 7, counting Eleanor. The math was done. The math had been done for hours. But numbers on a screen and a woman walking through the door of a boardroom were two different things, and Marcus Chen knew it. And he had between now and 9 a.m. to make sure the second one didn't happen. Danny pulled the vehicle around, a plain gray SUV he'd borrowed from a colleague with no connection to anyone in the story. And Ray sat up front while Ethan helped Victoria into the back. She moved with the particular determination of someone who has decided that pain is a fact to be managed and not a reason to slow down. She had the documents in a portfolio on her lap, her good arm wrapped around it, the splinted arm resting against her side. Zoe was with Mrs. Patterson across the street, dropped there at 5:45 by Ethan, who had told his daughter he'd be back before dinner and had gotten, in return, a hug of surprising intensity and the words, "Tell Victoria she's standing up." He'd relayed the message in the car. Victoria had looked out the window for a moment. Then, "Tell her she's the reason I am." They drove the long way downtown, deliberately, switching routes twice at Danny's direction, watching for tails, moving through the early morning city that was just beginning to wake up around them. They were 4 blocks from Sterling Tech headquarters when the black SUV appeared. It came from a side street and fell in behind them at a distance. Too practiced to be coincidental, too measured to be improvised. Danny clocked it in the mirror without expression. "We've got a tail. Vantage vehicle, I think. Same plate sequence as one of the cars from the street." "They're not going to move on us in rush hour traffic," Ray said. "They're not trying to move on us," Ethan said. He was watching the side mirror. "They're documenting. If they can't stop her, they're trying to create a record. That she arrived with armed security. That the approach was irregular. Something they can take to the board and say the process was compromised. Then we give them nothing to work with," Victoria said. "Danny, drop me at the main entrance. Standard drop. Professional. I walk in the front door with my portfolio and my attorney's filing on record and my board support already secured." She paused. "They can photograph that all they want. You're not walking in alone," Ethan said. "I know." She looked at him. "I'm walking in with you." He held her eyes. "I'm HVAC," he said after a moment. The corner of her mouth moved. "You're my witness. If anything happens between the lobby and the boardroom, I want someone with me who the board can later confirm was present. Someone with no financial stake, no board position, no corporate connection." She looked at him steadily. Someone who was just there because it was the right thing. He thought about that kid from Biloxi. The burning truck. The 4 seconds that changed the shape of everything that came after. "Okay," he said. Danny pulled up to the front entrance at 8:47. Victoria opened the door and stepped out onto the sidewalk and stood up straight. Not easily. Not without cost. The brace and the splint and the bruising and the 3 days of running and holding on visible if you knew how to look. But fully upright, with a portfolio under her arm and her chin level and the absolute undefended certainty of a woman who has nothing left to prove to anyone and knows it. The Vantage SUV idled across the street. Let them document, Ethan thought. Document all of it. He got out and walked beside her through the front door. The lobby security guard recognized her immediately. He stood up from his station so fast his chair rolled back and hit the wall behind him. "Miss Sterling!" His voice had something in it. Relief, maybe. The particular relief of people who work in the orbit of a person and feel the wrong of their absence before they can articulate why. "We didn't know. They said you were—" "I'm here, Ronnie," she said. Her voice was warm, direct, entirely real. She knew his name. Of course she knew his name. "I have a 9 a.m. board meeting. Who else has come through this morning?" Ronnie looked at his log. "Mr. Chen arrived at 7:50, Mr. Price at 8:10, 4 other board members between 7:30 and 8:30. He glanced at the log again. Ms. Chow arrived at 8:40. Good, Victoria nodded. Thank you, Ronnie. Yes, ma'am. He paused and looked at her with the uncomplicated directness of a man who has no stake in corporate politics and no reason to be anything but honest. Glad you're okay, Miss Sterling. She held his gaze for just a moment. Thank you, she said, and meant it in the way that reaches further than the words. She walked to the elevator. Ethan walked beside her. The doors opened. They stepped in. The doors closed. She exhaled. Not the controlled exhale. Not the managed one. The real one. The one she'd been holding in some form since Thursday night on a wet road in Vine City. Whatever happens in there, she said. It's going to go the way it should, he said. She looked at the elevator doors. You don't know that. No, he said. But I know you. 3 days is long enough. The elevator arrived at the boardroom floor. The doors opened. At the far end of the corridor, through the glass panel of the boardroom door, Marcus Chen was already visible. Standing at the head of the table, immaculate, composed, prepared for a meeting he had spent years engineering. He looked up when the elevator opened. He saw her, and in the half-second before he controlled it, something moved through Marcus Chen's face that had no management, no calibration, no smoothness, something that was purely animal and purely reactive. Fear. Victoria saw it. She felt it, the way you feel the specific confirmation of something you needed to know. She walked forward. She pushed open the boardroom door like she owned it, because she did. The room was full, 12 of the 13 board members already seated. The 13th, a man named Harold Voss, coming in behind Victoria, with his coat still on and his briefcase in his hand, surprised to find her already through the door. Eleanor Chow was at the far left of the long table, composed and straight-backed, and when she saw Victoria, she gave a single, small nod. The kind of nod that means everything has already been decided, and now it's just a matter of saying it out loud. Marcus was standing at the head of the table. He had prepared for this meeting the way he prepared for everything. Precisely, thoroughly, with contingencies built into contingencies. He had a presentation on the screen behind him. He had Gerald Price beside him, loyal and nervous in equal measure. He had 6 board votes in his pocket and a legal filing designed to muddy the water, and a 4-year relationship he had dismantled from the inside while calling it love. What he had not prepared for was this. Victoria Sterling, bruised and splinted and walking with the careful deliberateness of someone managing real pain, crossing the threshold of a room she had built her career inside, with a portfolio under her arm and absolutely nothing to apologize for. Marcus, she said. One word, his name, said without heat, without tremor, without the weight of 4 years of grief and betrayal trying to press through it. Just his name, the way you say the name of something you are finished with. His composure held. Barely. Victoria. He looked at Ethan, standing just inside the door. Who is this? A witness, she said. Sit down, Marcus. I'm not. This is my boardroom. She walked to her chair at the head of the table. Or rather, she walked to the chair beside the head of the table. The chair she occupied as CEO, in a room where the head technically belonged to the board chair. A distinction Marcus had spent 2 years leveraging against her. She set her portfolio on the table in front of her and pulled the chair out and sat down. Then she looked at Marcus with the clean, unafraid steadiness of someone who has already won and knows the only thing left is the acknowledgement of it. I said, sit down. He sat. Gerald Price looked at Marcus. Marcus looked at Victoria. The other board members looked at all three of them in the shifting, recalibrating way of people who have been watching a balance of power and are watching it change. Eleanor Chow folded her hands on the table. "Perhaps we should begin," Eleanor said. Victoria opened the portfolio. She didn't make a speech. She didn't explain her bruises or her splint, or the fact that she had spent 4 days being hunted through the streets of her own city by men paid by the man sitting 10 feet from her. She didn't tell the story of Thursday night, or the rain, or the stranger who'd stopped because it was the right thing. All of that was real, and all of it mattered, and none of it belonged in this room. What belonged in this room was on paper. She walked the board through it with the same flat, operational clarity she'd used with Ethan on that first night, but sharper now, more precise, stripped of everything personal. Transaction records, routing numbers, shell companies established in Delaware and the Cayman Islands, and traced back through 3 layers of incorporation to accounts controlled by Marcus Chen and Gerald Price and 2 other board members sitting at this table. Equity transfers, amendment documents. The text messages, printed and distributed through Whitfield's filing, showing the timeline of the conspiracy in Marcus's own words. She spoke for 22 minutes without interruption. Nobody interrupted. Not because they were being polite, because the room had the particular quality of a place where a truth is being told so clearly and completely that there is simply no air for anything else. Marcus sat through all of it without moving. His composure was extraordinary. Ethan, watching from the door, had to acknowledge that. The man had the stillness of someone who has practiced for exactly this eventuality and decided on a performance in advance. The performance was calm, skeptical, quietly confident that the evidence would be explained and contextualized and would look different in the right light. The performance was very good. It just wasn't good enough. When Victoria finished, she closed the portfolio. She looked at Eleanor. Eleanor looked at the room. "The motion before this board is a vote of no confidence in Ms. Sterling's leadership. I believe we all understand the motion." She paused. "I believe we also now understand the context in which that motion was filed. Before we proceed to a vote, I want to give the board a moment to sit with what we've just heard and ask ourselves one question." She let the silence do its work for 3 full seconds. "Who does this company actually belong to?" Nobody answered. Nobody was meant to. "The vote," Eleanor said. It went quickly. The board secretary called each member in turn. The 4 who had committed to Marcus voted with him, Price, and 2 others whose names would be in the federal filing that Whitfield submitted the following morning. The remaining 9 voted in Victoria's favor, including 2 who had been in Marcus's column as recently as Saturday evening and had clearly spent a sleepless night recalibrating. 9-4. The motion failed. The room was very quiet for a moment. Then Marcus pushed his chair back. "This is not over," he said. Not to the room, to Victoria, directly. The composure was still in place, but something had cracked beneath it, and the thing beneath it was uglier. The real face that 4 years had kept behind the other one. "You think a vote in this room changes what's coming? You have no idea what I've put in place. I have attorneys. I have—" "Marcus!" Victoria's voice stopped him. Not loud, just absolute. "I've already submitted everything to the SEC. As of 8:14 this morning, 45 minutes ago." She held his eyes. "The federal investigation into Sterling Tech's board activities is already open. You don't have attorneys who can outrun that." A pause. "And your building access has been deactivated as of 7 a.m. today. I arranged it Friday." The color drained from his face in a slow, specific way. "You—" He stopped. "Sit down, Marcus," Eleanor said. "Or leave.
Those are your options. He stood there for 3 more seconds. 3 seconds where Ethan watched a man understand that the ground beneath him was not uneven. It was gone, and had been gone before he'd arrived at this table. And then he walked to the door. He stopped when he reached Ethan. They were the same height. Marcus looked at him the way men look when they're calculating whether there's something left to recover. Some move they haven't made, some lever they haven't pulled. His eyes were still intelligent, still dangerous in the low, quiet way of a mind that hasn't accepted an outcome. He looked at Ethan like he was trying to identify what exactly he was looking at. What category of person stops in the rain for a stranger and ends up here? "Who are you?" Marcus said, very low. "Nobody," Ethan said. "Just a guy who was driving home." Marcus held his gaze for another second. Then he walked out. Ethan watched him go and did not feel what he expected to feel, which was some form of satisfaction. He felt tired. The tired that comes after something has been finished and the weight lifts and you realize how long you've been holding it. From the table behind him, he heard Victoria's voice. Different now. The last of the operational register falling away. Something warmer and more unsteady underneath it. Saying to the room, to Eleanor, to the 9 board members who had just done the right thing, "Thank you, all of you. I know this was not simple." Eleanor Chow said, with the dry warmth of a woman who has been in rooms like this her entire career and lost count of how many times she had waited for someone to finally tell the truth. "It was very simple, Victoria. We just needed you to show us the door." The federal agents arrived at the building's lobby at 9:47, 12 minutes after the meeting adjourned. Whitfield had timed the SEC filing with the precision of someone who understood that the space between the board vote and Marcus Chen reaching his car was a window that needed to close. It closed. Ethan watched from the lobby as 2 agents in dark coats crossed to the security desk, showed credentials, and asked for Marcus Chen. He watched Ronnie, the security guard, pick up the phone with the practiced calm of a man who has been in his job long enough to have seen nearly everything and has made his peace with it. He stepped outside. Ray was waiting on the sidewalk. He had his hands in his jacket pockets and his eyes on the street. And when Ethan came out, he looked at him the way friends look at each other after something has happened that neither of them will fully talk about for years. "Done?" Ray asked. "Done," Ethan said. Ray nodded slowly. "You good?" "I'm good." Ethan looked at the sky. The same city, the same downtown, the same streets that had been cold and wet and dangerous 4 days ago, standing in ordinary morning light, like none of it had happened. "I want to get home." "Zoe's at Patterson's?" "Yeah." "Go. I'll wait for the others." Ethan put his hand on Ray's shoulder for a moment. No speech. The grip said what it needed to say, and Ray understood it the way he understood most things, without requiring the explanation. Ethan went back inside to find Victoria. She was in her office. Not the boardroom, her own office. The one with the east-facing windows and the desk with the false-bottom drawer and the safe behind the painting. She was standing at the window with the portfolio in her good arm and her back to the door, looking out at the city. He stood in the doorway. She heard him. "The agents took him in the parking garage," she said without turning. "Gerald Price went voluntarily. The other 2 board members are already calling their attorneys." She paused. "Whitfield says the SEC filing will lead to criminal referrals within 30 days. "He's right," Ethan said. "My company is going to be in the news for months. There will be questions about governance, about my judgment, about how I missed it for 4 years. She turned from the window. Her face was composed, but the composure was the honest kind now, not armored, just steady. "People are going to ask how I could have been engaged to him and not known." "What are you going to say?" The truth, she said simply, that I loved someone who wasn't real, that it cost me things I can't get back, and that it also showed me things I didn't know I had. She looked at him. People who showed up. He crossed the room and stood beside her at the window. The city spread out below them, indifferent and enormous, and full of ordinary lives running their ordinary courses. Somewhere across it, in a quiet house on the west side, his daughter was eating Mrs. Patterson's breakfast and waiting for him to come home. "What happens now?" he asked. "Now I run my company." She said it with the quiet certainty of someone who knows what they're for. "I repair what was damaged. I fire who needs to be fired and rebuild what was gutted. I push the disability employment initiative that Marcus stalled for 2 years, and I—" She stopped, restarted. "I call Diane, today, before anything else. She'll be glad to hear from you. She'll probably yell at me first." "Probably," he agreed. "You'd deserve it." She almost smiled. The real one again, small, surprised, entirely unpolished. "You're honest." "You said you wanted honesty." "I did." She looked at him. There was something in the look. Not the CEO, not the woman in the road, not the careful operational version she'd been for 4 days. Just her. The version that existed before the armor and after the fear. "I don't know how to repay you for this. I know you're going to say there's nothing to repay. You're going to say you were just driving home. You're going to make it uncomplicated." "It's not uncomplicated," he said. She went still. "I stopped because it was right," he said. "I stayed because it was right. But you—" He looked at her the way men look when they've decided to say a true thing and are saying it without apology. "You changed something. In my house. With my daughter. You showed her something about what it looks like to not give up. And she's 7 years old, and she's going to carry that for the rest of her life, and I—" He paused. "I'm grateful for that. So don't talk to me about debt." Victoria Sterling stood in her office, in her building, in the company that bore her name, with the federal case against the man who had tried to take it from her already moving, and the board vote already counted, and the road ahead already opening. And she looked at this man who had stopped his truck in the rain because his daughter was watching. And she said nothing for a long moment. And then she said, "Would you bring Zoe to dinner? Saturday. Wherever you want. My choice or yours, I don't care. I just—" She stopped, started again, honest and unguarded and done calculating. "I want to keep knowing you, both of you, if that's okay." He thought about the drawing on the refrigerator, the one Zoe had made, him, her, and a blank space beside them that she'd never explained. "Saturday," he said. She exhaled. "Saturday." He picked Zoe up from Mrs. Patterson's at 11:30. She was in the front yard when he came through the gate, coat on and backpack over her shoulders, like she'd been ready for the last hour. She looked at his face the way she always did, that quick, total assessment, and said, "She's okay." It wasn't a question. "She's okay," he confirmed. Zoe nodded. Then she took his hand as they walked to the car, swinging their arms a little, the way she did when things were right with the world. "She's going to be on the news," she said. "Isn't she?" "Probably." "That's going to be weird." She climbed into her seat. "I told you she was standing up." "You told me," he agreed. "I'm usually right about people." She buckled her seatbelt. "Mommy was too. She said you can always tell who someone really is by what they do when it's raining." He sat in the driver's seat and looked straight ahead through the windshield for a moment. "She did say that," he said quietly. "I think she meant people like you," Zoe said. and people like Victoria. He started the car. He didn't try to find the right response to that because there wasn't one. His daughter had just said the precise, true thing that lived at the center of the entire story. And when someone does that, the only decent response is silence, and the understanding that some people, even 7 years old and already carrying a loss too big for their shoulders, see the world with a clarity that most adults spend a lifetime trying to recover. He drove home. The city moved past them, ordinary and indifferent, and full of people going about the business of their lives. People who had not been in a boardroom this morning, who had not stood in a rain-soaked street at midnight, who had not made the choice or felt the cost of it, or received the unexpected and unearned grace of being changed by someone they found in the road. Most people don't stop, Victoria had said. She was right. Most people don't. They calculate and they keep driving, and they tell themselves the math made sense. And maybe it does. Maybe the math always makes sense until the moment you decide it doesn't, and you pull over, and you get out in the rain, and you find out what you're made of, not in the big dramatic moment, but in the simple and unglamorous act of not leaving someone alone in the dark. That was the whole story. All of it. A man drove home through the rain. He stopped. And everything that followed, the fear, the cost, the evidence, the boardroom, the 9 votes, the federal agents in the garage, the dinner on Saturday, the blank space in a child's drawing that had been waiting patiently to be filled, all of it followed from that single choice, made in the dark, with no guarantee of outcome, by a man who decided that what his daughter saw him do mattered more than what it cost him. Ethan Calloway turned onto his street, pulled into the driveway, and turned off the engine. Zoe was already unbuckling. "Grilled cheese for lunch?" she asked. "Sure," he said, "with tomato soup." "It's not raining," he said. She looked at him with the imperious patience of a 7-year-old who has already decided. "It doesn't have to be raining." He got out of the car. The house was exactly as he'd left it. Small, a little worn, a yard that still needed work, drawings on the refrigerator, and a first aid kit under the sink, and a guest room with a freshly made bed that someone had slept in for the first time. Nothing about it had changed. Everything about it was different. He went inside and made tomato soup. And somewhere across the city, in an office on the 7th floor of a building that had her name on it, Victoria Sterling picked up her phone, pulled up a contact she hadn't called in 8 months, and let it ring. Not once, not twice, but long enough to mean something. Until the woman on the other end picked up and said, "Victoria," in a voice that cracked on both syllables. And Victoria said, "I know, Diane. I know. I'm sorry. I'm still here." She was still here. That was enough. That was everything.